The vampire king granted the dying waitress one last wish, but what she asked destroyed him forever. "Kill my sister," she whispered through blood-stained lips, her trembling hand clutching the ancient vampire's collar as her life drained onto the rain-soaked pavement. And in 3,000 years of granting final wishes to the dying, Lysander Blackthorn, the immortal king of the Northern Territories, had never heard words that shattered him so completely. Wait, before the next revelation happens, if this mystery has already captivated you, let us know where you're following this story from. To make sure you don't miss any unexpected alliances or awakened powers, subscribe and join our circle. The game is about to change. Now, back to the scene. The alley stank of garbage and desperation, a fitting stage for death in this forgotten corner of Chicago. Lysander had been walking past when he'd heard the heartbeat, irregular, fading, and against every instinct honed over millennia, he'd turned into the narrow passage between crumbling brick buildings. Now he knelt in a puddle, his $1,000 suit ruined, staring into eyes that should have been begging for salvation, but instead burned with something far more dangerous. "What did you say?" His voice carried the weight of centuries, but uncertainty crept into it like frost. The girl, she couldn't have been more than 25, coughed, and more blood bubbled at the corner of her mouth. Her waitress uniform was torn, the name tag reading Claire hanging by a single pin. 3 stab wounds decorated her torso, the work of someone who knew exactly where to cut to make death slow. "My sister," Claire repeated, each word an obvious agony. "Marina Whitmore. Kill her. That's my wish." Lysander had developed a protocol over the long years. When he encountered the dying, and he encountered them often in his endless wanderings, he offered them a final gift. One wish, granted with all the considerable power at his disposal. It was a penance of sorts, a way to balance the scales for the countless lives he'd taken in his youth before he'd learned to control the hunger. Most wished for mercy, for their pain to end. Some wished to see a loved one last time. Others wished for messages to be delivered, for wrongs to be righted, for justice. Never, in 3 millennia, had anyone wished for murder. Why? The question escaped him before he could stop it. He never asked why. The dying deserved their wishes without interrogation. Claire's laugh was wet and horrible. "Because she's the one who did this." She gestured weakly at her wounds. "Hired someone, wanted me gone, and she'll do it to others. She's done it before." "Then wish for justice. I can bring evidence to light. Ensure she faces—" "No." Claire's grip on his collar tightened with surprising strength. "The system doesn't touch people like her. Rich, connected, beautiful." She spat the word like a curse. "She'll smile in court and walk free. I know she will. I've seen her do it." Lysander found himself caught in those dying eyes, gray as storm clouds, filled with a conviction that unsettled him. "I don't kill innocents." "She's not innocent." Claire's voice was fading now, her body growing cold even in his arms. "Please, I'm dying anyway. This is all I have left, the only power I'll ever have. Don't let it be wasted." Something in her tone, not pleading, but commanding, as if she were the immortal sovereign and he the supplicant, made him pause. In 3,000 years, he'd perfected the art of reading people, of seeing into their souls in those final moments when all masks fell away. What he saw in Claire wasn't cruelty or revenge-born madness. It was clarity. cold, terrible clarity. "Tell me," he said softly, "before you go, tell me everything." Claire's breathing had become shallow, but her eyes remained fixed on his. "Marina is my half-sister." Same father, different mothers. He was wealthy. When he died, everything went to her, his legitimate daughter. I got nothing. My mother got nothing. She coughed again, weaker this time. I didn't care, didn't want his money. But Marina, she couldn't stand that I existed, living proof of his infidelity. So she's been destroying me, slowly, got me fired from jobs, turned my friends against me, poisoned every relationship I tried to have. That's cruelty, Lysander acknowledged, but not murder. I'm getting there. Claire's smile was ghastly. 6 months ago, she came to me, offered money if I'd disappear, leave Chicago, never use the Whitmore name, never tell anyone about our connection. I refused, not because I wanted anything from her, but because I'm tired of being erased. The rain intensified, drumming on the dumpsters that lined the alley. Lysander found himself leaning closer to hear her fading words. Last week, my roommate, Sarah Chen, told Marina no. Marina had been dating her brother, and when he tried to break it off, Marina threatened to destroy his career. Sarah stood up to her, told her she'd expose what kind of person Marina really was. Claire's voice dropped to barely a whisper. They found Sarah in the river 3 days ago. Police called it suicide. But I know it was Marina. And you confronted her? No. Claire shook her head slightly. I went to the police, tried to connect the dots, tried to make them see. They laughed me out of the station, said I was jealous, delusional, said the Whitmores are pillars of the community. Her hand, still clutching his collar, began to slip. So I went home, to my shitty apartment, and someone was waiting, in the dark. They didn't say anything, just started cutting. Lysander steadied her with his other arm. You saw their face? No. But before I managed to run, to get out into the street, I heard a phone ring. Heard them answer. Claire's eyes, which had been drifting, suddenly focused with laser intensity. Heard them say, "Yes, Miss Whitmore, it's done." The silence that followed was profound, broken only by rain and the distant sounds of traffic from the main street. "If you won't kill her," Claire whispered, "then at least investigate, please, before she does this to someone else, before another Sarah, another me, ends up bleeding in an alley." Lysander had made many mistakes in his long existence. He'd trusted the wrong people, loved the wrong causes, believed in kingdoms that crumbled to dust, but had always prided himself on his ability to sense truth from lies, especially in those final moments when humans had nothing left to gain from deception. Claire was telling the truth. He could feel it in his bones, ancient and certain. "I'll investigate," he found himself promising. "If your sister is guilty of what you claim, she will face justice." Not justice. Claire's voice was barely audible now. Death. That was my wish. You said one wish. I'm using it. Kill Marina Whitmore. Claire, promise me. Her eyes were fading, the gray becoming clouded. Promise me. Don't let me die for nothing. Don't let her win. Lysander had broken many promises over the centuries. He'd learned that words were wind, that oaths were made to be abandoned when convenient. But he'd never broken a deathbed promise. That was the one line he'd never crossed, the one rule he'd maintained even in his darkest years. "I promise," he heard himself say, "that Marina Whitmore will face what she deserves. If she's guilty, she is. Then she will pay, with her life, if that's the only justice available." Claire smiled then, a real smile, and something in Lysander's chest, something he'd thought long dead, twisted painfully. "Thank you," she breathed. "Thank you for listening, for believing me. What's your full name?" he asked urgently, sensing she had only seconds left. "Claire Whitmore," she whispered. "Claire Whitmore. Even though she tried to erase it, that's who I am." Her hand fell from his collar. Her eyes stared up at the rain, no longer seeing. Lysander remained kneeling in the alley for a long time after, holding the body of a dead waitress who'd used her final breath not to beg for life, but to demand justice. Had granted many wishes, reunited lovers, delivered messages, saved the innocent, exposed the corrupt, but had never promised to kill someone, never been asked to become, once again, the monster he'd spent centuries trying to outrun. "What have you done to me, Claire Whitmore?" he murmured to the corpse in his arms. The only answer was rain and silence. Lysander carried Claire's body to the nearest hospital, laying her gently at the emergency room entrance before vanishing into the shadows. Had learned long ago not to stay for questions, not to let authorities see his face or learn his name. Vampires survived by being ghosts, by touching the world without leaving traces. But this time, he would need to be seen. To investigate Marina Whitmore properly, he'd need to enter her world, and that meant becoming someone who belonged there. By dawn, had returned to his penthouse apartment in the Gold Coast, 40 floors above the city, surrounded by the accumulated treasures of 3 millennia. He stood at the window, watching the sunrise, something he could tolerate, unlike the vampires of legend, though it still made his skin prickle uncomfortably. His phone rang. Victor, his second-in-command and only remaining friend from his dark years. "My lord." Victor's accent was thick, Russian overlaying something older. "I heard you made a promise to a dying girl." Lysander wasn't surprised. Victor had eyes everywhere, informants scattered throughout the city. News travels fast. When the king of the Northern Territories kneels in an alley holding a corpse, people notice. When he carries that corpse to a hospital, they remember. Victor paused. "What are you doing, Lysander?" "Keeping a promise." "You promised to kill someone? If they're guilty? And if investigating makes you guilty of a crime? If it exposes us?" Victor's voice hardened. "You've spent centuries building this territory into something stable. Peace with the hunter guilds, alliances with the witch covens, a reputation for restraint. This could destroy all of it." "Then it destroys it." Lysander turned from the window. "I gave my word to a dying woman." "You've given your word before and found ways around it?" "Not like this." Lysander couldn't explain it, even to himself. There was something about her, Victor. The way she looked at me. Like she was the one with power, not me. Like she was granting me a gift, not the other way around. Silence on the line. Then, "You're 3,000 years old. Don't tell me you're developing a conscience now." "Maybe I never lost it. Maybe I just buried it deep enough that I could pretend it was gone." Lysandro moved to his study, to the computers and databases he'd learned to navigate over the past few decades. Marina Whitmore. I need everything on her. Everything. This is a mistake. Probably, but it's mine to make. Victor sighed. "I'll send what I have within the hour. But Lysander, be careful. If this Whitmore woman is as connected as the girl claimed, investigating her will draw attention, the kind we've spent centuries avoiding." Noted. After Victor hung up, Lysander stood in his study, surrounded by first editions and ancient manuscripts, and wondered what he was doing. He'd survived for 3 millennia by following certain rules. Never get involved in human affairs. Never make promises he couldn't elegantly escape. Never, ever let emotion cloud judgment. Claire Whitmore had shattered all 3 rules with her dying breath. His computer chimed. Victor's files arriving. Lysander opened them and began to read. Marina Whitmore, age 32. Heiress to the Whitmore industrial fortune, estimated net worth of $400 million. Educated at Yale and Harvard Business School. Board member of 6 corporations, 3 charities. Photographed constantly at galas and fundraisers, always impeccably dressed, always smiling. The photos showed a woman of extraordinary beauty, dark hair, sharp cheekbones, blue eyes that seemed to look through the camera. In every image, she wore designer clothes and expensive jewelry, her posture perfect, her smile calculated. Lysander had known countless beautiful people over the millennia. He'd learned that beauty was often a mask, a distraction from the rot beneath. He kept reading. Marina's mother, Catherine Whitmore, had died when Marina was 12. Her father, Richard Whitmore, had died 2 years ago, leaving everything to Marina. No mention anywhere of a second daughter, of Claire. Lysander dug deeper, accessing records that were supposed to be sealed, using skills and connections built over centuries. He found Richard Whitmore's death certificate, heart attack, natural causes. Then he found the hospital records. Richard had been admitted 3 times in the year before his death, each time with symptoms consistent with poisoning, arsenic, possibly, or something similar. But each time he'd recovered, and no one had investigated further. The 4th time, there'd been no recovery. Lysander sat back in his chair, ice forming in his veins. He searched for Sarah Chen, found her obituary. Beloved daughter, sister, friend. The funeral had been held 4 days ago. Police had ruled it suicide. Jumped from a bridge, body found in the river. But the autopsy report, which Lysander accessed through less than legal means, told a different story. Bruising consistent with a struggle. Water in the lungs, yes, but also a head wound that had occurred before death. Signs of being held underwater. The detective's notes mentioned these inconsistencies, but concluded that Sarah might have changed her mind mid-jump, struggled instinctively as she drowned. The case had been closed within 48 hours, no further investigation recommended. Lysander found a connection. The detective who'd closed the case had recently purchased a vacation home in Florida, cash payment, well above his salary grade. He was beginning to see the shape of it. Marina Whitmore didn't get her hands dirty. She hired people, paid them well, made problems disappear. But that wasn't enough for a conviction in his court. He needed more. He needed proof that would satisfy not just the law, but his own conscience before he kept his promise to Claire. Which meant he needed to get close to Marina Whitmore. By midday, Lysander had crafted a new identity. Alexander Thorne, venture capitalist from London, new to Chicago, interested in investing in local enterprises. Wealthy enough to move in Marina's circles, mysterious enough to be interesting. He dressed carefully. Brioni suit, Patek Philippe watch, shoes that cost more than most people's monthly rent. The armor of the wealthy, designed to signal belonging. That evening, there was a charity gala at the Drake Hotel, the Whitmore Foundation's annual fundraiser. Marina would be there. Lysander arrived fashionably late, moving through the ballroom with the ease of someone who'd attended 1,000 such events across the centuries. Chandeliers glittered overhead, music played. People in expensive clothes sipped expensive wine and made expensive small talk. He spotted Marina immediately. She stood at the center of a group, holding court, her laughter crystalline and perfectly timed. The photos hadn't done her justice. In person, she was luminous, magnetic. Lysander had met countless predators in his long existence. The way she assessed everyone who approached, the calculated warmth of her smile, the cold intelligence behind her eyes. She was dangerous. That much was immediately clear. He waited, letting her notice him. It didn't take long. He was tall, striking, and most importantly, unknown, A new player in a social scene where everyone knew everyone. Marina excused herself from her group and approached him directly, a champagne flute in her hand. "I don't believe we've met," she said, her voice cultured and smooth. "Marina Whitmore. And you are?" "Alexander Thorne." Lysander took her offered hand, noting the strength of her grip, the way she held eye contact just a beat too long. "New to Chicago. I've heard impressive things about your foundation's work." "All true, I assure you." Her smile widened. "What brings you to our city, Mr. Thorne?" "Opportunity? I invest in promising ventures, business, real estate, sometimes people." He matched her smile. "Chicago seems full of potential." "It is, if you know where to look." Marina gestured to the ballroom. "This event, for instance. We've raised $2 million tonight for literacy programs, all while everyone drinks and socializes. Efficient, don't you think?" "Very. Though I imagine organizing something like this requires considerable skill in managing people." "It does." Something flickered in Marina's eyes. Appreciation, perhaps, at being recognized. "I've learned that most problems can be solved with the right resources applied in the right way." "Problems like?" Lysander kept his tone light, curious. "Oh, anything. Funding shortfalls, negative publicity, competitors who don't know when to concede." She sipped her champagne. "The key is identifying what motivates people. Everyone wants something. Once you know what that is, they become very cooperative." Lysander felt something cold settle in his chest. She was telling him, without quite saying it, exactly who she was. Confident enough in her power that she didn't bother hiding. "That's a rather cynical worldview," he observed. "Realistic," Marina corrected. "My father taught me that. He was a brilliant man, but he had a weakness for sentiment. It made him vulnerable. It made him make mistakes. Such as?" Marina's expression didn't change, but Lysander sensed he'd pushed slightly too far. "Such as trusting the wrong people. Believing that loyalty could be bought with kindness rather than leverage." She turned, gesturing around the room. "Tell me, Mr. Thorne, what do you see when you look at this event? Wealthy people spending money to feel good about themselves." "Exactly, and I've given them that opportunity. In exchange, I get their money, their connections, their support. It's transactional, honest in its way." Marina looked back at him. "The mistake people make is pretending these things are about love or charity or compassion. They're about power, always have been." "And you prefer honesty about that?" "I prefer clarity. My father believed he could help people, save them, make their lives better. It destroyed him, literally." She said it casually, but Lysander caught the edge beneath the words. He gave, and people just took, including some who had no right to anything from him. Claire. She was talking about Claire, and she didn't even know that Lysander knew. "Sounds like he had a complicated life," Lysander said carefully. "He did, but I've simplified mine." Marina's smile returned, bright and sharp. "I know exactly who deserves my resources and who doesn't. I protect what's mine, ruthlessly, if necessary. An admirable quality in business, in everything." Marina finished her champagne, setting the glass on a passing waiter's tray. "I'm hosting a dinner party this Saturday. Small, intimate, just a few interesting people. Would you like to attend? It was an opportunity, possibly a test." "I'd be delighted." "Excellent." Marina produced a card from her clutch, heavy stock, embossed lettering. Her private address, 8 o'clock. Dress is formal. And Mr. Thorne, come prepared for interesting conversation. I find boredom the worst sin of all. With that, she turned and glided away, leaving Lysander standing alone with a business card that felt like a challenge in his hand. He'd been invited into the predator's den. Now he just had to survive long enough to find proof of what Claire had known in her dying moments. That Marina Whitmore was a killer. Cold, calculating, and utterly without remorse. The next 3 days, Lysander devoted himself to research. He couldn't investigate Marina directly without raising suspicion, so he investigated the people around her instead. Her lawyer, Gregory Hartman, 54, Harvard Law, specializing in making problems disappear for wealthy clients. He'd successfully defended 3 accused murderers, all of whom had walked free. His bank accounts showed regular large deposits from Whitmore Industrial. Her assistant, Patricia Morgan, 36, loyal to Marina for 8 years. No criminal record, but her sister had been hired by Whitmore Industrial at an executive level she wasn't qualified for. Leverage and reward intertwined. Her driver, James Kovac, 42, former military, dishonorable discharge for excessive force during a classified operation. He'd been hired by Marina 2 years ago. His financial records showed he was being paid 3 times the normal rate for a personal driver. The pattern became clear. Marina surrounded herself with people who were either compromised, indebted, or violent. People who would do what needed to be done without asking questions. Lysander also looked into Marina's past relationships. She'd been engaged once to a man named David Sterling, a fellow Yale graduate who'd come from old money. The engagement had ended abruptly 4 years ago. David Sterling was now living in a psychiatric facility in Vermont, diagnosed with severe paranoid schizophrenia. According to the medical records, his breakdown had been sudden and catastrophic. He'd gone from successful investment banker to incoherent and delusional in a matter of weeks. The doctors noted that his symptoms were consistent with long-term exposure to certain hallucinogenic compounds, but they'd found no evidence of drug use. The case remained a medical mystery. Marina had visited him once, shortly after his commitment. She'd never returned. Lysander sat in his study, surrounded by evidence of a woman who destroyed anyone who got in her way, who challenged her control, who threatened her carefully constructed image. Claire had been right. Marina was a monster, just a different kind than Lysander himself. The question was, what would he do about it? Saturday arrived cold and clear. Lysander dressed in a Tom Ford tuxedo, studying himself in the mirror. He looked 30, perpetually. The age had been when he'd been turned 3 millennia ago in a forgotten kingdom that was now dust. The face looking back at him was handsome, aristocratic, with dark hair and darker eyes. A face that had watched empires rise and fall. A face that had once terrified entire villages. Now it was going to dinner with a serial killer. Victor called as Lysander was leaving. "You're really doing this." "I gave my word." "To a dead woman who asked you to commit murder?" "To a dead woman who asked me to stop a killer." Lysander checked his watch. "If Marina Whitmore is innocent, I'll know by the end of the night. If she's guilty, then what? You kill her at her own dinner party? In front of witnesses? Then I find a way to bring her to justice that doesn't expose our kind or start a war with the hunter guilds." Lysander headed for the door. "I'm 3,000 years old, Victor. I've learned patience. You've also learned to avoid entanglements." This woman, Claire, she's entangling you, dead or not. Lysander paused at the threshold. Maybe that's not entirely a bad thing. He hung up before Victor could respond. Marina's home was in Lincoln Park, a massive Victorian mansion that had been in the Whitmore family for 4 generations. Lysander arrived precisely at 8, presenting his invitation to the doorman. Inside, the house was a study in tasteful wealth. Original artwork, antique furniture, fresh flowers in crystal vases. Everything perfect, everything calculated to impress. Marina greeted him in the foyer, wearing a red gown that probably cost more than a car. "Mr. Thorne, so glad you could make it." "Wouldn't have missed it." "Come, the others are already in the drawing room." She led him through halls lined with family portraits, generations of Whitmores staring down with varying degrees of severity. Lysander noted that none of them were smiling. The drawing room held 6 other guests, all impeccably dressed, all radiating the particular confidence that came with wealth and power. Marina made introductions: a real estate developer, a city councilwoman, a tech entrepreneur, a museum director, an art dealer, and a federal prosecutor. Lysander cataloged each one, noting the connections. All of them were useful to Marina in some way. All of them were here because she'd calculated their value. Dinner was served in a dining room that could have hosted 20. The long table gleamed with silver and crystal. The food was exquisite, courses that appeared and disappeared with clockwork precision, each paired with perfect wines. The conversation flowed as smoothly as the wine. Politics, art, business, topics designed to showcase intelligence and influence. Marina orchestrated it all from the head of the table, guiding discussions, prompting debates, ensuring everyone felt heard while subtly maintaining control. Lysander played his part, the mysterious investor, charming and well-traveled, hinting at deals in London and Paris and Hong Kong. He told carefully constructed truths wrapped in misdirection, the skill of centuries making it effortless. But he was also watching, observing how Marina interacted with each guest, how she adapted her tone and body language, how she deployed compliments and critiques like surgical strikes. She was brilliant. That was the terrifying part. If she'd chosen to use her intelligence for good, she could have changed the world. Instead, she'd chosen to protect her own power at any cost. After dinner, Marina invited everyone to the library for brandy and cigars. The room was 2 stories tall, lined floor to ceiling with books, some of them quite old. Lysander recognized a few first editions that were worth fortunes. As the others settled into conversation, Marina approached him. "You've been quiet tonight, Mr. Thorne, observing more than participating." "Old habit. I find you learn more by listening than talking." "And what have you learned?" "That you're an exceptional host. That you've assembled a group of people who are, in their own ways, quite powerful. That this dinner is as much about business as pleasure." Marina smiled. "You're perceptive. I like that." She gestured to a pair of chairs in a quieter corner. "Join me?" They sat, brandy glasses in hand, slightly apart from the other guests. Lysander could feel Marina's attention focusing on him, sharp and assessing. "Tell me something true, Mr. Thorne," she said. "Something real, not the curated biography you've been sharing all evening." It was a test. She was pushing, seeing if he'd reveal something genuine. "I once knew someone," Lysander said slowly, choosing his words with care, "who told me that the hardest part of having power is knowing when to use it and when to show restraint. That the temptation is always to use it, to solve every problem with force, but the true strength is knowing you could destroy something and choosing not to." Marina studied him over her brandy. "And do you agree with that philosophy?" "I used to, but lately I've wondered if sometimes restraint is just another word for cowardice, if there are moments when power should be used decisively to eliminate threats before they grow." "Now we're having an honest conversation." Marina leaned forward slightly. "Do you know what I've learned, Mr. Thorne? That people are either predators or prey. There's no middle ground, not really. And the predators who survive are the ones who recognize that truth and act on it." "And you consider yourself a predator?" "I consider myself a realist. I protect what's mine. I remove obstacles. I ensure my own survival." Her eyes glittered in the lamplight. "My father was prey pretending to be a predator. It got him killed." "You think he was killed?" "It was a risk, pushing like this. But Lysander needed to know how far Marina would go, how much she'd reveal. Marina's smile didn't waver. I think he died because he was weak. Whether that was at someone else's hand or his own body's failure is irrelevant. The result is the same. And the people who might have hastened that result, if they existed, would have done him a mercy, ended his suffering, allowed someone stronger to take control. Marina sipped her brandy. "You're asking remarkably pointed questions, Mr. Thorne. Why?" Lysander had two choices, retreat or push forward. He chose forward. "Because I'm trying to decide if we can do business together. And I need to know if you're as ruthless as I suspect, or if it's all carefully cultivated image. It's both. The image is real. The reality is the image." Marina set down her glass. "Let me tell you a story. When I was 12, my mother was dying of cancer. Slow, painful, humiliating. She begged my father to help her end it, to give her mercy. He refused, said it was murder, that it was wrong, that she needed to fight." Her voice remained perfectly controlled, but something cold entered her eyes. "So I watched her suffer for 6 more months, watched her waste away, watched her beg for death every single day. And I promised myself that when I had power, I would never let sentiment override logic, never let misguided morality cause unnecessary suffering." "So you helped your mother die?" "No, I was 12 and powerless, but I learned the lesson. And when my father's time came, when he was suffering from the poison of his own weaknesses, his own foolish choices, I didn't prolong it. I let nature take its course, efficiently." She was confessing, not directly, but clearly enough that Lysander understood. She'd killed her father, possibly helped him along, possibly just didn't intervene when she could have. The line was blurry, but the intent was crystal. "And others?" Lysander asked softly. "Others who've gotten in your way?" Marina stood, smoothing her gown. "I think you're asking if I'm a monster, Mr. Thorne. Let me ask you something in return. If you had the power to eliminate someone who was actively trying to destroy everything you'd built, who was a genuine threat to your survival and the survival of those you protect, would you show mercy?" It was the same question Claire had forced him to answer in that alley, the same question he'd been wrestling with for days. "I don't know," he admitted. "Then you're more honest than most." Marina extended her hand. "I like you, Mr. Thorne. You're dangerous, I think, but so am I. Perhaps we can be dangerous together." Lysander took her hand, feeling the strength in her grip, the calculation behind her smile. Perhaps. As they rejoined the other guests, as the evening continued with more conversation and more wine, Lysander found himself thinking about Claire. About her dying wish, her absolute certainty that Marina needed to die. He'd found his proof. Marina was everything Claire had claimed, a killer, cold and remorseless, who eliminated anyone who threatened her control. But watching her now, charming and brilliant and absolutely in command of her domain, Lysander realized something troubling. He understood her. 3,000 years ago, he'd been exactly like her. A predator who'd believed that power justified any action, that survival was the only law that mattered. It had taken him centuries to learn differently, to understand that power without restraint was just another word for tyranny, that being the strongest didn't make you right. Could Marina learn the same lesson, or was she too far gone, too committed to her vision of the world as predator and prey? And more importantly, did it matter? He'd made a promise to a dying woman. Promises were debts, and debts had to be paid. The evening ended near midnight. Guests departed with thanks and promises to connect soon. Lysander was the last to leave, lingering as others filtered out. Marina walked him to the door personally. "Thank you for coming, and for the honest conversation." "Thank you for the honesty." Lysander paused on the threshold. One question, if I may. Of course. Do you have any regrets about the choices you've made, the people you've hurt? Marina considered this seriously. No. Regret implies I had better options and chose poorly. I've always done what was necessary with the information and power available to me. That's not something to regret. That's something to take pride in. Even if innocent people were hurt in the process, there are no innocent people, Mr. Thorne. Everyone has their own agenda, their own darkness. Some just hide it better than others. She smiled. Call me Marina, by the way. I think we're past formalities. Then call me Alexander. Alexander? She tested the name. It suits you. Old-fashioned, strong. She glanced back into her house, then returned her attention to him. I have a proposition for you. A business opportunity that requires someone with your particular combination of resources and moral flexibility. I'm listening. Not tonight, but soon. I'll be in touch. Marina leaned forward, kissing him lightly on the cheek. A European custom, perfectly executed. Drive safely, Alexander. The door closed, leaving Lysander standing in the cold Chicago night, her kiss burning on his skin like a brand. He'd infiltrated Marina's world, gained her trust, or at least her interest, confirmed that Claire's accusations were true. Now came the hard part, deciding what to do about it. The next 2 weeks unfolded in a strange dance. Marina reached out regularly. Lunches, drinks, late-night phone calls where they discussed philosophy and power and the nature of human society. She was courting him, in her way, testing him, assessing whether he could be trusted with deeper secrets, more direct involvement in her affairs. Lysander played along, revealing just enough of himself to seem authentic while keeping the essential truth hidden, that he was a 3,000-year-old vampire investigating her for murder. During this time, he also continued his research. He found 3 more suspicious deaths connected to Marina over the past 5 years. An ex-boyfriend who'd threatened to reveal unflattering information about her. Car accident. Brakes failed. A business rival who'd tried to buy out Whitmore Industrial. Heart attack, despite being 40 and healthy. A journalist who'd been investigating the Whitmore family's connections to several controversial political campaigns. Home invasion. Killed by an intruder who was never caught. The pattern was clear. Marina identified threats and eliminated them with impressive efficiency, always maintaining plausible deniability, always ensuring the deaths looked natural or random. She was smarter than most serial killers. She didn't have a type or a pattern that profilers could identify. She simply removed obstacles, and each removal was unique, tailored to the victim and circumstances. It was, in its own terrible way, brilliant. Lysander found himself in an increasingly uncomfortable position. He'd promised Claire he would kill Marina, but executing that promise meant becoming once again the monster he'd spent centuries trying to transcend. It meant using his power for murder, for revenge, for ends that he determined were just. It made him no different than Marina herself. He needed another way, some path that would honor his promise to Claire while not requiring him to become judge, jury, and executioner. The answer came during a late-night call with Marina 3 weeks after the dinner party. "I need to show you something," she said. "Tomorrow night. Come to my house at 10. "What is it?" "Proof that I trust you, and a question that needs answering." Lysander agreed, curiosity and dread mixing in equal measure. The next night, he arrived at the Victorian mansion to find Marina waiting in her study, a room he hadn't seen during the dinner party. It was smaller, more intimate, lined with filing cabinets and a massive desk covered in documents. "Close the door," Marina instructed. He did. She poured 2 glasses of whiskey, handing him one. "I told you I had a business proposition. This is it." She opened a folder on her desk, spreading out photographs. Lysander looked down and felt his blood turned cold. They were surveillance photos of him, entering his building, leaving restaurants, meeting with Victor. "Who are you really, Alexander Thorne?" Marina asked, her voice calm. "Because Alexander Thorne, the London venture capitalist, doesn't exist. There's no record of him before he arrived in Chicago 6 weeks ago. No business history, no social media presence, no footprint at all." Lysander remained silent, calculating his options.
"At first, I thought you might be law enforcement," Marina continued. "FBI, maybe, or some private investigator hired by someone with a grudge. But your resources are too extensive, your knowledge too specific. You're not a cop." She picked up one of the photos, Lysander entering his building at 3 a.m. "You also don't sleep much, don't eat at most of the meals we've shared, and you have this way of moving that's old, like you're performing being human rather than actually being it." Lysander's hand tightened on his whiskey glass. She'd gotten close, dangerously close. "So I started thinking about other possibilities," Marina said, "and I remembered something my father told me when I was young. He claimed that when he was building the first Whitmore industrial plant, he'd encountered someone, who'd offered to invest, who'd helped negotiate with difficult unions, who'd made problems disappear. Someone who never aged, who'd shown up in old family photographs decades apart, looking exactly the same." She pulled out an old photograph, black and white, dated 1952. It showed a group of men in suits standing in front of a factory. One of them looked exactly like Lysander. "This is my grandfather in 1952. And that," Marina pointed at the Lysander look-alike, "is listed in the company records as Victor Thorne, a European investor who helped establish the Chicago operation." "Victor was my great-uncle," Lysander said, the lie coming easily. "Is it?" Marina pulled out another photo. This one was sepia-toned, dated 1887. Another factory opening, another group of formally dressed men. And there, looking identical to both modern Lysander and the 1952 figure, was someone labeled as V. Thorne, financial backer. "3 generations," Marina said softly. "Same face, same name, or variations of it, always showing up when the Whitmore family needs help or faces a crisis." She set down the photos and looked directly at Lysander. "What are you?" Lysander had faced this moment before, over the centuries, the moment when someone got too close to the truth. He'd always handled it the same way. Disappear, let time erase the questions, re-emerge decades later when everyone who'd noticed was dead. But this time, he couldn't disappear. He'd made a promise to Claire, and keeping that promise required staying in Marina's orbit. Which meant, for the first time in over a century, he was going to have to reveal himself. "You're right," he said quietly. "Alexander Thorne doesn't exist, but I do. I've existed for a very long time." Marina's expression didn't change, but Lysander saw her pulse quicken, heard her heartbeat accelerate. Fear and excitement. How long? 3,000 years, give or take a century. "And what are you?" Vampire. The word felt strange on his tongue. He rarely spoke it aloud. Though not like the stories. "I don't turn to ash in sunlight, don't fear crosses or garlic. But I don't age, don't die. And yes, I need blood to survive, though I haven't killed a human for food in over 1,000 years." Marina stood very still, processing this. Then, incredibly, she smiled. "Prove it." Lysander set down his whiskey glass and moved, faster than human reaction could follow,
crossing the room to stand behind Marina in the space between heartbeats. She gasped, spinning around, and found him right there, close enough to touch. Fast enough? He asked. God, yes. Marina's eyes were wide, but not with fear, with fascination. What else can you do? I'm strong, strong enough to tear through steel. I can hear your heartbeat from across the room, hear whispers from floors away. I can see in complete darkness, and I'm very, very difficult to kill. Marina reached out slowly, touching his face, his neck, as if confirming he was real. Why are you here, in Chicago? Why did you approach me? This was the moment. Truth or lies, trust or manipulation. Lysander chose truth. I made a promise to a dying woman. Her name was Claire Whitmore. Marina's hand dropped. All the fascination drained from her face, replaced by something colder. I see. She asked me to kill you, Lysander continued. Said you'd murdered her, or had her murdered. That you'd killed others. That you needed to be stopped. And you believed her? I investigated, found proof of what she claimed. The deaths, the payoffs, the pattern of eliminating anyone who threatened you. Marina walked back to her desk, her movements controlled despite what must have been roiling emotions. So why didn't you? Kill me. You clearly have the power. Because I gave my word to stop a killer, not to become one again. Lysander moved to stand across the desk from her. I've been a monster, Marina. For centuries, I was exactly what legends say vampires are. Brutal, cruel, feeding on humans without thought or remorse. It took me a very long time to learn to be something else. And now, what? Rehabilitated? Marina's voice dripped with scorn. How noble of you. No, now I'm tired. Tired of killing. Tired of seeing the same patterns repeat across centuries. The strong preying on the weak, power corrupting, violence breeding more violence. Lysander leaned forward. Claire was right about you, but she was wrong about the solution. Killing you doesn't stop the pattern. It just perpetuates it. So what do you want? To redeem me? Save my soul? Marina laughed bitterly. I don't need saving, Alexander, or whatever your real name is. Lysander. My name is Lysander Blackthorn. Lysander. Marina tested it. King of the Northern Territories? I've heard of you. Read about you in my father's old journals. He documented his encounters with your kind. Apparently, you have a reputation for being one of the more civilized vampires. If civilization means restraining myself from slaughtering everyone who annoys me, then yes, I suppose I am. But you're here because a dying waitress asked you to kill me. How restrained is that? I'm here because I couldn't ignore her, Lysander's voice roughened. She was 25 years old, bleeding to death in an alley, and her final thought wasn't for herself. It was for stopping you from hurting anyone else. That kind of selflessness is rare. It deserved to be honored. Marina sank into her desk chair, suddenly looking exhausted. Claire was always self-righteous, even when we were children. Yes, I knew her when we were young, before my father had the good sense to send her and her mother away. She always thought she was better than me, kinder, more moral. Maybe she was. Maybe. Marina looked up at Lysander. But morality doesn't pay bills, doesn't protect you from people who want to take everything you have, doesn't stop rivals from destroying you the moment you show weakness. It doesn't require becoming a murderer either, doesn't it? Marina stood again, agitated now. You think I wanted this? To be constantly vigilant, constantly eliminating threats? I didn't choose to be born into wealth and power. It was thrust on me. And from the moment I understood what that meant, I knew I would either control my world or be controlled by it. She moved to the window, staring out at the dark gardens. My father was kind, generous. He believed in giving people chances, in forgiveness, in redemption. And you know what it got him? Betrayed, used, manipulated by everyone from business partners to his own mistress. Claire's mother? Yes, that grasping, ambitious woman who saw a married millionaire and decided he was her ticket to a better life. She got pregnant deliberately, tried to force my father's hand, make him divorce my mother and marry her instead. Marina's reflection in the dark window looked haunted. My father refused, paid her off, set her up in a nice apartment with a trust fund for the child. And what did she do? Came back every few years, demanding more. Threatening to go public with the affair, to destroy his reputation, to ruin everything. So you made her stop? I made sure she understood that coming after my family would have consequences. She got the message, eventually. And Claire? Claire was collateral damage. I didn't hate her personally, but she existed as a living reminder of my father's weakness, his one moment of moral failing. And when she started making noise about her rights to the Whitmore name, about being recognized as family, I couldn't allow it. Marina turned from the window. Do you understand? It wasn't personal, it was practical. Claire threatened the integrity of everything my family built. She had to be removed. Lysander stared at this woman, beautiful, brilliant, utterly convinced of her own righteousness, and felt a wave of something he hadn't experienced in centuries, genuine sadness. You don't even see it, he said quietly. You've become exactly what you feared. Your father was controlled by his emotions, his compassion. You're controlled by your fear, your need for perfect control. You're not free, Marina. You're imprisoned by your own paranoia. Better imprisoned than destroyed. Is it? Lysander moved closer. Look at your life. Really look at it. You're surrounded by people you've bought or blackmailed. You can't trust anyone because you assume everyone is like you, willing to betray, to murder, to destroy for personal gain. You eliminate anyone who might challenge you, anyone who might care about you, because you see all human connection as threat. He gestured to the mansion around them. You have wealth, power, everything material you could want, and you're absolutely, completely alone. Is that really better than what your father had? Marina's jaw tightened. My father died of a broken heart and a poisoned body. I'm still alive. Are you? Because from where I'm standing, you look like a ghost, going through motions, performing a role, but not actually living. How's your 3,000-year-old vampire working out? You're so enlightened, so restrained, and yet here you are, stalking a human woman because a dying stranger asked you to? Tell me, Lysander, how is that different than what I do? It was a fair point, a devastating one. You're right, Lysander admitted. I'm not that different. I'm still a predator, still someone who uses power to impose my will on others. The only difference is that I've learned to hate myself for it. Then maybe you should stop hating yourself and start embracing what you are, like I have. They stood facing each other across the study, two apex predators. Two people who'd structured their entire existence around control and power and survival. And Lysander realized that Marina wasn't his enemy. She was his mirror, a reflection of what he'd been, what he could still become if he let his guard down, if he stopped fighting against his nature. I can't embrace it, he said finally. Because I've seen where that road leads, It leads to emptiness, to centuries of existing without living, to becoming the monster that parents warn their children about in the dark. And yet, you keep existing. Keep going, year after year, century after century. Why? If it's so empty, why not just end it? Because of moments like Claire's, Lysander said. Moments when someone looks at me and sees not a monster, but hope, a chance for justice, for help. Those moments are rare, but they're what make the rest of it bearable. Marina shook her head. You're a fool, a powerful, ancient, dangerous fool. Probably. Lysander moved toward the door. But I'm a fool who's going to keep his promise, not by killing you, but by making sure you can't hurt anyone else. And how do you plan to do that? I don't know yet, but I'll find a way, without becoming you in the process. He reached the door before Marina spoke again. Lysander, he turned. If you try to destroy me, I will fight back. With everything I have, every resource, every connection, every weapon. Her eyes glittered. I like you. I might even respect you. But I will absolutely end you if you threaten me. I know. And you're still going to try? I have to. I gave my word. Marina laughed, short and bitter. To a dead woman. To a woman who died believing someone would stop you. I can't let that faith be misplaced. Then I guess we're enemies now. I guess we are. Lysander left the mansion, walking out into the cold Chicago night, feeling the weight of an impossible promise settling on his shoulders like a shroud. He'd thought investigating Marina would be simple. Find proof, exact justice, move on. But nothing about this was simple. Marina wasn't a monster, or rather, she wasn't just a monster. She was brilliant and broken, shaped by fear and loss into something hard and sharp and deadly. Killing her would be easy. Lysander could do it in seconds, make it look like an accident, disappear before anyone noticed. But that would make him the monster Claire had trusted him not to be. So he needed another way, a way to stop Marina without destroying her, a way to honor his promise while maintaining his own tenuous grasp on civilization. He just had no idea what that way might be. The war between them began quietly. Marina moved first, using her resources to investigate Lysander's properties, his financial networks, his connections. She was smart enough not to attack directly. That would expose her. But she began dismantling his carefully constructed identity piece by piece. Bank accounts froze. Properties were suddenly investigated for code violations. Business partners received anonymous tips about irregularities in Lysander's finances. Lysander countered by leaking information about Marina's affairs to journalists, carefully documented evidence of payoffs and suspicious deaths. He was careful, making sure nothing could be traced back to him, but the damage was done. Questions arose. Investigations were opened. Marina escalated. Victor reported attempts to follow him, to track down Lysander's daytime resting places. Clearly, Marina had found experts on vampires, hunters perhaps, or academics who studied the supernatural. Lysander responded by gathering more evidence, building an airtight case against Marina that he could release if necessary. The death toll connected to her was now undeniable. At least 7 people, possibly more, all eliminated because they'd threatened her control. It was a stalemate. They were too evenly matched. Marina with her wealth and connections, Lysander with his power and centuries of experience. Something had to give. The break came from an unexpected source. Patricia Morgan, Marina's assistant. She reached out to Lysander through an anonymous email asking to meet. They met in a coffee shop in a suburb far from Chicago proper. Patricia was nervous, constantly glancing at the door, but determined. "I've worked for Marina for 8 years," she said without preamble. "I've watched her destroy lives. I've helped her do it, and I'm done." "What changed?" Lysander asked. "She killed my sister's best friend, Sarah Chen. I didn't know at the time. Marina kept me compartmentalized, only told me what I needed to know. But I figured it out, put the pieces together." Patricia's hands shook around her coffee cup. "Sarah was kind to my sister when she was going through a rough time. She was good, and Marina had her murdered because she stood up to her." She looked up at Lysander. "I know who you are, what you are. I've been going through Marina's files, her father's old journals. I know you're investigating her. And you want to help. I want to stop her, before she hurts anyone else, before she makes me complicit in something even worse." Patricia pulled out a USB drive. "This has everything." Financial records showing payments to the people who carried out her hits. Recorded phone calls, she didn't know I was saving them. Communications with her lawyer about managing problems. It's not enough to convict her in court, but it's enough to expose her. Lysander took the drive carefully. "Why are you doing this?" "Because someone has to. Because I'm tired of being afraid. And because—" Patricia hesitated. "Because I looked into what happened to Claire Whitmore. Read the police reports, the hospital records. She was stabbed and left to die in an alley, and nobody cared. Nobody investigated, nobody tried to find justice for her. Except me, except you. A vampire who met her once for 5 minutes while she was dying." Patricia smiled sadly. "If a monster can care more about justice than the entire human system, then maybe the rest of us need to do better." With Patricia's information, Lysander finally had what he needed: comprehensive proof of Marina's crimes, documented in her own hand, impossible to dismiss or explain away. But he still faced the same question: what to do with it? He could release everything to the police, the media, the world. Marina would be destroyed, prosecuted, convicted, imprisoned. Justice, of a sort. But it would also expose Patricia, put her in danger. Marina's allies would retaliate. And knowing Marina, she had contingency plans, insurance that would destroy others if she fell. There had to be another way. Lysander spent 3 days thinking, planning, considering every angle. And then on the 4th day, he had it. A solution that would honor his promise to Claire, stop Marina, and might, just might, give everyone involved a chance at something better. He called Marina. "We need to talk. One more time. No tricks, no weapons, just conversation." "Where?" "The alley where Claire died. Tonight, midnight." Silence on the line. Then, "You're sentimental. I wouldn't have expected that. Humor me." "Fine." "But if you're planning to kill me—" "I'm not, I promise." "Your promises seem to be worth something. Against my better judgment, I'll trust this one." Midnight found them both in the alley, still garbage-strewn, still reeking, still forgotten by the city that rushed past its entrance. Marina wore a long coat and carried herself with her usual confidence, but Lysander could smell the fear beneath it. She'd come armed. He could hear the gun in her pocket, the knife in her boot. "I'm not going to kill you," he said again. "Not tonight, not ever." "Then what is this?" A choice. Lysander pulled out a manila folder. "Inside this is everything. Every crime you've committed, every person you've hurt, documented in your own words, proven beyond any doubt, enough to destroy you completely." Marina's expression didn't change, but her heartbeat spiked. And I'm giving you a choice, Marina. The same choice I gave myself centuries ago when I realized what I'd become. He held out the folder. Take this, read it. See yourself from the outside. See the trail of bodies and ruined lives you've left behind. And then decide, is this who you want to be? Is this life, isolated, paranoid, surrounded by fear and death? Is this really better than what your father had?